Well, here's the problem. Hebrews is just so complicated. So I started writing this long, and I thought, I'm just going to leave Melchizedek out. So he got axed. I'm Dr. Marianne Meye Thompson, and I'm the George Ladd Professor of New Testament. I'm going to be introducing the book of Hebrews today from the perspective of a New Testament scholar. Hebrews may be one of the most neglected books in the New Testament. It's in many ways one of the most puzzling books in the New Testament. We call it the letter to the Hebrews, but it's not quite clear whether this is a letter or a long sermon or an exhortation or an argument for something. It seems to have a variety of forms. It also has some very memorable passages in it. One of the better known is the long catalog of the heroes of faith that we read in chapter 11. Here we find the names of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Samuel, David, and the prophets. These are held up as great examples of the faith for the readers of the letter. And after the author makes that list, offers that list of all these great heroes of the faith, he writes this: "Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with perseverance the race that lies before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." That passage puts Jesus at the beginning and the end of everything that has to do with the life of faith. Jesus is both the pioneer, the one who started it all, and the perfecter of faith, the one who brings it to its wonderful, glorious conclusion. Jesus leads the way. He leads us to our destination as the pioneer of faith. The book also argues that no one can surpass Jesus in dignity, in status, and in honor, and that nothing can surpass the blessings that Jesus brings. In fact, the whole book of Hebrews is one extended argument about the superiority of Jesus to everything and to everyone who came before him. Jesus is better. Jesus is better than Moses, better than Joshua, better than all the priests and their sacrifices, and better than the sanctuary in which those sacrifices were offered. And that's why he's worth following. And that's why we can be confident that Jesus will get us to our goal. And that goal is life with God. So what this letter tries to do, in a nutshell, is to persuade its readers that Jesus is a sure guide, a guide who can be trusted. And it tries to do that by arguing that Jesus is better, superior to all the guides who have come before him. He's like them in some important ways, but what he offers is better than what any of them could have offered. Jesus is a better Moses, a better Joshua, a better high priest, and offers a better sacrifice. And all of this is better because it belongs to the new work of God through his Son. And what's interesting here is that Jesus is compared to the previous work of God, and that work was good, and it was genuinely God's work. What God did through Moses and Joshua and the priests and the sacrifice of the Old Covenant all point to Jesus, but they are good in and of themselves. And yet what God has done through Jesus surpasses all that. It's better. You might say that in Jesus, God has outdone himself. Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, can therefore take people to their final destination. And there is a journey, a pilgrimage for the people of God. And the people of God are called to follow Jesus, that pioneer and perfecter of faith, and to do so faithfully. As noted earlier, as I said before, the book of Hebrews often appeals to what are called sometimes the heroes of faith, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on. They are examples of faith because they are headed for something they didn't see. They are headed for something they can't see. But they are also examples of faithfulness. They keep on going, even when they don't always know exactly where they are going. Now, who needs a letter like this? Who are the readers of this letter? Who are its recipients? The letter says its readers have endured a hard struggle with sufferings, chapter 10, and that they have sometimes been publicly exposed to abuse and persecution. Now, we don't know exactly who they are, But you might see why they need to be encouraged to keep faith in Jesus, to keep on going faithfully, because they've been through hard times, a hard struggle with sufferings, exposed to abuse and persecution. But you see, there's a little bit of a rub here, because if they follow Jesus faithfully, they'll be following someone who himself endured a hard struggle with suffering and was exposed to abuse and persecution. The author also writes that, yes, they have suffered, they have struggled, but they have not yet shed their blood, chapter 12. Maybe it's coming. Maybe he sees on the horizon the martyrdom that we know early Christians experienced. Maybe this first century author does know of other saints who have suffered and given their lives for their faith. No wonder these readers need to be encouraged to keep their faith in Jesus. But again, there's a bind, because Jesus himself did shed his blood, and maybe these people are being called to that fate as well. The author of this letter also writes to his readers that their faith is somewhat stunted. They are dull in understanding. They are needing milk when he wants to give them solid food. Sometimes I get the feeling they are just tired. They are weary, and it's hard to keep going. And the author says to them, you need to keep going to follow Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. This letter is sometimes called the letter to the Hebrews because in its initial publication, it was assumed that the readers were Jewish Christians, that is, Hebrew-speaking Christians, Jewish believers in Jesus. They would be the ones who would appreciate arguments about Moses and covenant and sacrifice and law. And so it may be that we are talking about Jewish believers in Jesus who are weary or anxious or fearful about what might lie ahead if they follow this Jesus. But I think the letter resonates with any reader who is weary or anxious or fearful. It encourages any and all readers to keep faith in Jesus and to keep faithfully following him. Hebrews also reminds us that we are not on this journey alone. Others have gone before us. Others are bearing testimony to us, urging us, keep on walking, keep on journeying towards God. Don't take your eyes off Jesus, because he is a faithful guide, and he will lead us to life with God. So listen to a couple of passages from the book of Hebrews, the first that talks about who Jesus is and what he has done, and the second that reminds us of the journey that he leads us on. The first one is from Hebrews 4, verses 14. Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And that's the basis for what we read later in the book. Let me then read what is one of the classic quintessential exhortations in the book of Hebrews. This is from chapter 12, verses 1 and following. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such hostility against himself from sinners, so that you may not grow weary or lose heart.